I only saw the results yesterday when they were announced online, and I spent last night reading all this, and I'm very encouraged by the results. And what struck me from the results is only 1%, less than 1% of people who responded to the online consultation want to follow what's happening in the UK, and 95% of respondents want access to medicinal cannabis and hemp cultivated and grown on the Isle of Man. And I fully support that, which is why I'm here.
And like you say, that's why you're here. So is that your interest now, is sort of taking that forward and looking at this potential emerging cash crop effectively?
Well, my main interest is making sure that the Isle of Man get it right, and that the people who responded to the online consultation, that the Manx government fulfil what the people require. And I think that what is needed is for the people who responded to contact their MHKs and tell them exactly what they want and give them the confidence so that you can have sensible regulations here on the Isle of Man to suit you, because it's not just the Isle of Man. There's a whole worldwide market out there, and I'm mainly based doing research in Jamaica these days. So there's a whole export market. And I think the Isle of Man has a unique place to research medicinal and hemp, and let's push this forward.
You've mentioned Jamaica there. That didn't feature in the consultation as a list of options. I think the strongest support came out in favour of this sort of state dispensary type model. Why do you think that the Jamaica model sort of got overlooked? Do you think it comes with a bit of a stereotype, if I'm honest?
Possibly, because Jamaica and ganja are synonymous, and the research that I'm doing in Jamaica, it was mainly based on the fact that 3 years ago they brought in a licensed and regulated system, which I think would suit the Isle of Man, and we can Manxify that so that we can use that as a basis, as a foundation, to come up with a sensible, regulated system here in the Isle of Man to, as I said, give the people who responded, who 95% want change. Let's do it.
So what have your initial discussions been like then? So obviously you came back to the island now. I remember being at one of the press launches and you guys, you came in and you mentioned the Jamaica model, and it was sort of met with rolled eyes, particularly from the Public Health Directorate. I mean, have you had sort of discussions across government departments since you've been back?
Yes, yesterday I had meetings with representatives of the Department of Health and Department of Trade and various other government departments, and I've got a few more meetings today. And there's a definite positive attitude to change here, but they need guidance because it's a subject that not many people know a lot about. But I've been researching cannabis and its medicinal applications and also its hemp applications for the last 20 years. So I think I have a unique view that I can bring here and bring knowledge from throughout the world.
In relation to the Isle of Man, do you see it perhaps adopting its own approach now with this kind of mandate, I suppose, rather than following the UK? Because the framework in the UK has come under a bit of criticism, particularly from one professor who I spoke to, who just thinks that although it's perceived as quite liberal, doctors simply won't prescribe because they're ignorant to the educational side.
Yeah, I think doctors generally in the UK, and I have experience with this personally, is they want to help their patients, but they don't know anything about cannabinoids. They don't know anything about the endocannabinoid system that we all have in our human bodies. They don't learn about it during their training. And here on the Isle of Man, after speaking to some GPs here, they're desperate to learn. So first week in July, I'm back here, and we're going to be holding a meeting for doctors here in the Isle of Man so that we can talk to them and explain to them about cannabis and cannabinoids, and see if we can come up with the training for GPs on the island to be able to prescribe cannabis and cannabinoid preparations to their patients.
So what have the developments been in the UK? You know, because that's usually for the island, that's a good sort of marker for us to pit ourselves against. What changes have been made since that announcement in October by the Home Secretary? How available is it, medicinal cannabis, that is?
Well, in November last year, the UK Home Office announced that certain consultants will be allowed to prescribe cannabis, and one of the professors who is prescribed. Who can prescribe cannabis is Professor Mike Barnes, who I was with last weekend, and he's opened a couple of private clinics and is opening a few more in UK mainland. But I don't think that's a model that the people in the Isle of Man want to follow.
Well, why would that be?
Well, over in the UK across, there are concerns over connections between the Tory party and GW Pharmaceuticals, the producers of Sativex. Theresa May's husband is heavily involved with the Capita Group, which own 22% of GW Pharmaceuticals. And Victoria Atkins MP, the drugs minister at the Home Office, her husband is cultivating 45 acres of cannabis in Norfolk. And the UK is the largest exporter of medicinal cannabis in the world, and yet people in the UK mainland are having to pay up to £900 for an ounce of cannabis, which is ridiculous. Because if you're very wealthy, you could afford £900 for an ounce of cannabis from a private clinic, but a lot of people, they can't do that, so they have to resort to the black market. And what we'd like to see here on the Isle of Man is, let's make it cost effective. Let's bring the cost down. Let's give people the knowledge they need. Let's give them access to different strains of cannabis preparation, but at a cost that they can afford, which is not extortionate.
This has very much began as a campaign in the run up to this consultation. Now, in light of these results, there's been the formation of a new association, so to speak. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came around and who comprises that body?
Yeah, there's a new organisation which has been launched here in the Isle of Man, which is the Manx Medicinal, Cannabis and Hemp Association, of which I am a member of the steering committee as a special advisor, advising on regulations, what's happening in other places of the world. And my colleague Bob Cormish is a director of the new association. He's also a member of the steering committee, and we have other members. For example, Mark Ledhill is a member from the Department of Trade.
So very much endorsed now on a departmental level of government, and so this perhaps to you is a statement of intent, perhaps from the Isle of Man government.
I'm hoping so, but I think the ministers who can bring in these new changes, they haven't got the knowledge that we have, and that's what we're going to try and give them. We're coming up with some draft proposals and regulations that will fulfil the wishes of the people who've responded to the online consultation, so that we can come up with basically what they want, which is access to reasonably priced, regulated and quality control in regard to cannabis and cannabis preparations.